Story Spectacular
presents
The Mischievous Fairy Island. It all began with a long car ride. I drove for hours with Bo by my side. I had my camera, a spyglass, and a trail guide. Tonight was the night we'd prove fairies are alive. We crossed over the bridge, the island in sight. I glanced at Bo, his tail wagged with delight. We passed through the gate and took a sharp right. It was almost dusk, the time fairies take flight. Hopping out of the car, my spyglass in hand, I took a deep breath. Then Bo and I began. Right away, we could see shining mica in the sand. This is how many fairies mark their land. Through the woods and down the path, feeling weary, we came upon the home of the Rocky Beach Fairies. If you quickly grab a seashell and turn it on its side, you might just find a fairy trying to hide. Back on the trail, we found an open meadow where the sneaky fairies play hide and seek in the shadow. They're easy to spot. You can see their light flicker. Bo tried to catch one, but the fairy was quicker. Farther down, a rock wall juts out into the water. This is where the ocean fairies often find shelter. The ocean fairies fly from the east and the west. Then they nestle in the cracks for some much-needed rest. The trail is also home to the harvest flower fairies, who spend their time gathering blossoms and berries. Some can carry heavy loads with ease. Others have trouble when the flowers make them sneeze. The carpenter fairies live just around the bend. They are the hardest working of all the fairies, with many homes to build and mend. You too can build a fairy house if you have a hand to lend. As we crossed the footbridge, Bo started to fuss. We both knew there were fairies among us. These were no ordinary fairies, very different, you see. They were the mischievous fairies, as tricky as can be. Step after shaky step, I heard the branches crack and creak. I felt an acorn strike my head, and I let out a shriek. I heard giggles, chuckles, snickering, and laughter. Then a fairy took off flying, and Bo chased after. "No, Bo, no!" I hollered, but it was no use. Bo was off, a wild dog on the loose. I chased after until they were no longer in view. Bo and the fairy had disappeared. I didn't know what to do. Suddenly, a noise came from down the trail. It was Bo letting out a victorious wail. I ran up to him, and guess what I saw? Bo had the fairy trapped under his paw. The fairy shook and thrashed, but to no avail. I smiled down at Bo as he wagged his tail. Finally, proof! A fairy we had trapped. I pulled out my camera and took a quick snap. We let the ferry go and then reached the trail's end, climbed into the car, and drove around the bend. I stopped on the bridge to examine my photo. But before my eyes, the ferry vanished. Oh no. I sighed and placed my camera back into my pack. Before driving away, I took a quick glance back. Imagine that, Bo, I said with a smile. A whole fairy world on a tiny little isle. The end. To purchase this book and other titles by me, Angela Ferrari, go to storyspectacular.com and find my books on Amazon. To hear even more spectacular stories, be sure to listen to the Story Spectacular podcast. Subscribe for free on Spotify, Alexa, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you like to listen. Thanks for tuning in.